Hello, boys and girls, and welcome back to study philosophy with me together. And today we want to still study predicate logic. Now, as this is called a study session, I have to struggle as much as you. And I know that many people, they choose to study philosophy and they think, oh, it's a subject where you just talk. And then they realize, oh no, I have to do predicate logic. And as you may realize, I also have my problems with the subject. So sometimes it's really hard for me to understand what particular steps are for. And here I particularly don't understand what it means when I star off something. So we have learned these different kind of squiggles, reverse squiggles that they say. That means when I have, for example, the formula, it is not true that there is at least one x that has the property or the accident of fx. Then we can also write for all x, it is true that they are not having the property fx. So this is a reverse squiggle. We also had the rule of dropping existentials. That means I have the idea that there exists at least one x, so that Lx. So I can also assume that there must be a constant, at least one, and we can call that La. So La. So it means there is an A that has the property of L. And of course, we also have the universal drop, where we can say for all x it is true that if there are, for example, logicians, Lx, then they are funny. So if we have a human and he's a logician, then surprise, surprise, he is actually funny. And we are allowed to drop this universal by just saying, well, look here, we have a logician A, and this logician, because he is a logician, is funny. This little U shape here, it means if, then that, right? And of course, also from all x are not fx, we can say that if we have an A, he must be not f. Okay, and now what really confused me is we start the lines 2, 3, and 6 in the proof. So here we have a proof. That means like for all x it is true that, for example, if somebody's a logician, he's funny. And then we had the further assumption that there is at least one logician. And then we had the conclusion there exists at least one funny x. There's at least one x so that it has the property with funniness. So, and then we started to have a proof here. And now the question is, why do we have these rules of starring it off? As before, starred lines largely can be ignored in deriving further lines. Here are the new starring rules with examples. We start line 2, 3, and so star any well-formed formula on which you reverse squiggles. So here we have reverse squiggle. It's not true for all x that fx. Therefore, we can also write there is at least one x that is not fx. And I think that was done. Was it done? Was it done here? Yeah, it was done here. We had the assumption where we know the assumption is not true. No, actually, it's not this line. Which line is it? Or maybe this didn't happen in this proof. So these are just like some examples that are not adequate for the proof. So, and then we have star of any well-formed formula from which you drop an existential. So this is what we should star off. When we reverse squiggles or drop existentials, the new line has the same information. Don't star when dropping a universal. We can never exhaust an all statement by deriving instances, and we may have to derive further things from it later in the proof. Here's another quantificational proof. So I think what it means is that when we star off an existential, then we are not allowed to use it again. because it says there is at least one existential, there's at least one X, there exists at least one X, so that it is a logician. Yeah, and so we have to start off, and then we are not allowed to use it anymore for a for a drop initial existential. We cannot drop that anymore. However, for all statements, we don't have to start them off because we can always use further instances of A, B, C, D, E, F, G, because they say it's never exhaustible. I wonder why, because for all X, yeah, because we don't have a defined number of individuals in these statements. Yeah, and I think that's what it is. Okay, and here's another quantificational proof. So here we can probably observe how they start off. We already did that. So we have for all X, it is true that Fx and Gx, the dot means and, right? And therefore, for all X, Fx. And yeah, we could easily say here, this is the rule that we know from the general propositional rules, that if we have an and, we are allowed to drop one of its elements. That is the drop conjunction rule, if the name is correct. Okay, and then we have the assumption it is not true that f on x, so we do a reduction ad absurdum. We just assume that this here is not true, and this will lead to a contradiction, and then we can conclude that this actually must be true. And for proving this, of course, we only use what we have in the premises. So, and what we can derive here from 2, because we derived that it is not true that for all x, now we have a transformation into an existential quantification. And I wonder, that is not yet the reason why we start off, right? We don't start off. So this means that there is at least one x, so that it does not have the quality of, let's say, being funny. Okay, funny and G, I don't know what G could stand for. So we are allowed to do this. We derive this from 2. And then we derive from line 3. And here we actually drop the existential, and that's why we start off here. We derive there's at least, or there's one x that we call A, and that is a person that is not funny. Okay, and now we have signified this person. So, and then what we can also derive from 1, and here we also have a drop universal rule applied. So we say, okay, there must be at least one A that is funny and G. Okay, we derive that from the first line here. And this we don't have to start off because we cannot exhaust such a statement. And then from 5, we can conclude that FA, because according to the general propositional rules that we have clarified before, we can drop one of the members of an AND statement. And if this is true, then this statement must also be true. And now here we have a contradiction between 6 and 4. 4 contradicts 6. And therefore we can reject the initial statement, which is not x, fx. So that cannot be true because we derive a contradiction. And therefore we can conclude from 2 that x, fx must be true. So this here is the proof that I have just repeated again. And I hope now it's clearer what the star-off rules are used for. Again, I want to say I'm not a logician. I learned this too while I'm reading this. So we study this together. And if you feel like you're in the same boat like me and you also want to study that, then subscribe and let's have some conversations about that in the future. and you can also give it a like. So thank you very much. Live long, study more logic, and prosper.